Okay, sorry, beg your pardon. Moving on, the minutes of the previous meeting, those have been distributed. You've all seen them. I'm happy to move them from the chair as a correct record. Is that seconded? Has anybody got any arguments about the accuracy of the minutes? In that case, all those in favour of adopting them. Anyone against? That is carried. There's no urgent business. Public participation will occur as we go along. Declarations of interests. Agenda item 6, which is the Bamford application, I had an email from the applicant asking to brief me on it. I think a number of other members, if not all other members, may have received the same email. Is that right? Okay, thank you. Agenda item 9, the Taddington application. I'm a member of Taddington Parish Council, but was not present at the meeting when that was discussed. Agenda item 10, which is the Chelmorton application. I am acquainted with one of the objectors, Mr. Collins, whose wife, I think it is down to speak to us. He did contact me to make some complaints about this application, which I passed on to the planning department at the time. But I have not discussed with him the merits or otherwise of the application. One of the objectors is also Councillor David Chapman, who used to be a member of this committee, so we should just note that. Are there any other declarations of interest? Ginny?
Yes, I shall be abstaining from item 6 as I dealt with this at Bamford Parish Council.
Okay, doke. Are there any other declarations of interest? Good. Then let's move on then to the first application on the agenda, which is the site of the former NatWest Bank in Bamford. Excuse me, would you like me to... Oh, yes, yes, please do. Would you like to present it, please?
So, good morning. Before I start, I'll just give a quick update on a number of representations that were received since the report was written. A further 7 letters were received, 4 of which objected, 3 of which supported. And just for an update, that brings the total letters of support to 8 and the overall letters of objection to number 9. The reasons for support and objection can be found within the report. Okay, so this is a full planning application for the demolition of a derelict outbuilding and the construction of a 2-bedroom detached dwelling with front garden to the street and smaller private amenity space to the rear. The site is located within Fiddler's Well in the centre of Bamford. It is located just off the green. As I'm sure you'll be aware, it's the site of a former NatWest Bank, and historically there were 2 buildings on site. However, one has been demolished, so there is just 1 building left on site. There is no vehicular access to the site at present, and nor is it proposed. Access to the site is through a small gap in the wall to the north of the historic troughs. There are a number of neighbouring properties, including Lee House to the north, and then 1 Fiddler's Close to the south. And on the opposite side of the green is Moor Farm, a Grade 2 listed building. The site has a long planning history, but with approval for a dwelling granted first in 2008, and there's been several renewals and amendments to that approval. However, it's relevant to know that there has been 1 plan permission which has been confirmed to be lawfully implemented. Here we go, we've got the block plan here. So the application proposes an open market dwelling. Oh, sorry, here's going through some site photographs first. So you can see the relationship with Lee House to the north, 1 Fiddler's Close to the south. That's the existing access which is going to be retained for the application. The remaining building on site. And there's the relationship with Lee House again. And this is a photograph taken from the neighbouring property to the north, Lee House. Okay, and it's the existing elevations, and here we have the proposed elevations. So it's proposing an open market dwelling. It will have a street-facing elevation with a relatively low form and height. There would be a two-storey element which will sit perpendicular to the street-facing section. The report refers to it as 3 stories. However, the applicants have clarified that it is actually 2 stories with a loft space at the top. Another point to clarify is that in the report it refers to the gable width of the taller element as 3.5 metres. That is incorrect. It should actually read as 6.3 metres. So the key issues are the principle of development, and as noted, there is a extant permission for the redevelopment of the site. However, the redevelopment of Brownfield site is acceptable in principle, subject to effective conservation and enhancement of the site and surrounding landscape. So the pertinent consideration is whether this proposed scheme conserves and enhances the visual amenity of the area, including the conservation area. So here we are. So the design, as mentioned, is comprised of 2 main features, the street-facing one and the perpendicular one. So that's the front elevation, which is comprised of irregular detailing to the front, with some detailing on the gable end, which faces towards the green. And here's looking up from the south. You'll see that there is a near flat roof dormer located in the roof scope. Here it is again, looking from the east. And this is the view you'll get from the neighbouring property, Lee House. So that'll be looking towards the south. So officers have concern with the overall massing scale and orientation of the property. We have concern that certain elements of the scheme, most notably the perpendicular taller section of the building, would appear out of scale when compared to front elevation of the neighbouring properties. We have concern that there is the prominence of the gable, which will face towards the green, would be a striking feature in the street seam. And there are other smaller detailing, such as the irregular detailing on the front elevation and the dormer window, flat roof dormer window, which are features rarely found within the national park. So for those reasons, we consider that the detailed treatment would not be of a high standard, and it would not protect or enhance the visual amenity of the site, street, scene or settlement as a whole. And we therefore think it is in conflict with DMC3 and the adopted design guidance. In addition to harming the visual amenity of the area, as noted, it is in the Bamford Conservation Area, and we think for the reasons outlined there, the development would appear as a striking and incongruous feature within the setting of a conservation area, which would have harm on the setting of a non-designated heritage asset to the north. We conclude that it would amount to less than substantial harm to the significance of a conservation area, and the public benefits identified would not outweigh those harms. Moving on to amenity. So officers have significant concerns with the impact of the development on the amenity of the inhabitants of Lee House. So this is the view you get looking from Lee House. The application proposes the building would be situated approximately 700 millimetres away from the shared boundary. It would result in a 4.5 metre blank elevation, being situated in close proximity to the boundary. We consider that would have an overbearing and unacceptable impact on their amenity. The application has been supported by a daylight and sunlight report, which has found that the proposed development would not have an unacceptable impact on the daylight and sunlight to the occupants of Lee House, and it complies with the building research establishment criteria. However, we still consider that the overbearing impact would amount to an unacceptable impact on their amenity. So there are no highway objections, and the development is acceptable with regard to ecology and protected species, subject to compliance with the reports and conditions. Proposed development proposes a very high sustainability criteria, including building first approach and also renewable energies. So it is acknowledged to be in excess of what would be typically required from policy CC1. And to conclude, we consider that the proposed development is acceptable in principle. However, it would not conserve or enhance the visual amenity of the area or the street scene. We also consider that it would have a harmful impact on the significance of the conservation area, which would be in conflict with our adopted heritage policies. And it would also have an unacceptable impact on the amenity of inhabitants of Lee House, which would be in conflict with core strategy policy GSP3 and development management policy DMC3. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We have got a number of speakers on this. We'll start off with a statement being read by Karen. Would you do that for us, please? It's the statement of Catherine Sather or Sather, I'm not sure which it is, a heritage consultant.
Thank you, Chair. This is a written statement from Catherine Sather in support of the application. The officer's report discusses the impact on Lee House, which is not a listed building. The conservation area appraisal does not mention Lee House at all, and no important views are identified which include Lee House. There is no basis for giving one facade of an unlisted building viewed across a private site such a particular level of significance. The conservation area is characterised by buildings in a variety of orientations, some in terraces, but many are much less uniform, with juxtapositions of frontages, setbacks and positions in relation to the surrounding buildings. This is the case particularly around the green, with Moore's farmhouse, barns and cottages to the north-east. The character and appearance of the conservation area will not be harmed by the construction of a new dwelling near Lee House. The planner has confirmed that the application was not considered by a conservation officer, so the officer comments must be viewed as lacking specialist advice which is available within the local planning authority. The conclusions reached on the harm caused to the conservation area are not sound, and there is no evidence that the planner has followed the Historic England guidance on assessing the impact of the proposed development on the settings of heritage assets or specific guidance on assessing the significance of conservation areas. Conversely, the heritage impact has properly been assessed by a conservation professional with the highest level of professional qualification within the heritage statement, which concludes the development will have a neutral impact. The local planning authority planner wrongly considers the heritage impact. The derelict site currently has a negative impact on the conservation area and surrounding heritage assets. The scheme offers several heritage benefits, including removing the derelict building, creating a new dwelling sited in reference to the adjacent houses and designed in contextual materials and forms, beneficial landscaping, works to the stone walls and benefits to the stone troughs to the front of the site, particularly important for the annual well dressing. This assessment of neutral impact is in accordance with the definition of preserving as summarised by Lord Justice Lewison in Palmer versus Herefordshire Council. In this context, the concept of preserving the building or its setting means doing no harm. It has been assessed that the proposed new dwelling will not cause harm to the significance of the Bamford Conservation Area or to the setting of the listed buildings and stone troughs. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Right, the first speaker I have is Mr. Ben McIntyre. Good morning, Mr. McIntyre. In front of you, you've got the machine, and there's a button in front of you which, when you turn on, will enable us to hear you properly. So there should be a red light behind when you turn it on, and you have 3 minutes in which to make your point.
My wife and I have lived at Lee House, adjacent to the old NatWest plot, for over 17 years. During that time, there has always been an active planning application on the plot. For all these applications, there has been a restriction on the dimensions, requiring the building to be a low dwelling excavated into the existing ground levels, no more than 7 metres in depth and height. the reason given by past planning offers being to protect the residential amenities of the nearby properties. We've always anticipated the building to be built, and to mediate any impact that would have on our outlook, we installed a shed and trellis. Lee House is an excellently preserved 200-year-old Georgian cottage with stone coins, engraved stone door frames, sliding sash windows and riven stone roof. It is one of the oldest properties in Bamford, built around the time that the mill was rebuilt. It is a prominent building in the very centre of Bamford, a village that has grown from a hamlet to what you see today, all the while overwatched by Lee House. Although non-designated, we believe Lee House to be a significant historical asset. In 2008, the Peak Park were generous enough to financially assist us in renovating the stone roof, as it was considered a historic asset worth preserving, and the planning officers over the years have also protected Lee House from obscurity by imposing restrictions on the planning applications at the NatWest plot. The proposed dwelling is to be over 2 metres taller and wider than the extant application, dwarfing both our shed and Lee House itself. It will be significantly overbearing on our property, being a very close, blank, dominating, sheer vertical face of wall, topped by a steep slate roof and purely cosmetic chimneys, making it feel even taller. We know of no other buildings in the local area that have been erected this close to the principal elevation of another. The effect this will have on our light will be profound given the southerly aspect. Where before we had a strong sense of connection with the surrounding rural landscape, we believe the addition of the proposed dwelling will result in a building density more at home in a city setting, radically changing the centre of Bamford Village and our daily lives. It will be extremely imposing from our garden, which it will permanently overshadow at least 20% more of, and inside our house it will significantly reduce the light in our dining room, almost breaching BRE guidelines. It will obscure Lee House from view from Fiddler's Close, the Hollow, and much of Fiddler's Well. The addition of an air source heat pump in our direct line of sight will make the outlook seem industrial rather than a rural dwelling that we have tried hard to create. The applicants do not seem to consider Lee House an asset, but have instead referenced the more modern Guinness Housing Association buildings as justification for such a large structure. But these were built to address local social housing needs. The application today is for an open market house, and since the applicants are London-based, this could easily be yet another holiday home, further compounding traffic while adding nothing to the community. All benefits this application bring to Bamford can be also addressed with the extant permission. Approving this application will, however, bring significant harm to the historical asset of Lee House. Please help us today in preserving that asset in the centre of Bamford for future generations by rejecting this application.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is Ms McIntyre. I've got Rebecca McIntyre, is that right?
I don't have anything else to add beyond.
So you don't wish to speak? Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker I have is the applicant, Mr. Hale.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Would you put your button on, please?
Thank you, Chair and members. We first saw this unloved plot on a wet Sunday afternoon in autumn 2023 and knew it was for us. Our parents are ageing fast and we need to come back to the Midlands to be closer to them to look after them. As keen walkers and climbers, the Peak District is a natural choice for us. We were happy to spend our life savings on this neglected ground left vacant for too long. The climate and nature emergency are an important focus for us. We're keen to put our principles into action and design a house that treads lightly on the earth. We're proud to have gone very much further on sustainability than is mandated by the National Park, which the officer agrees with in paragraph 88, but has neglected to add to his planning balance as a clear public benefit. It's a shame that this site has been derelict for so long, a gap in the wide smile of the village, commented on in planning applications more than 10 years ago. The overwhelming majority of objectors to our proposal also want it to be developed. We took the design process very seriously, rooting our proposal in the valued characteristics of the green through a very thorough local study. We want to build something that celebrates the green, not detracts from it. And we wanted to bring the community with us. We spoke to neighbours. We hosted a community consultation in the pub. We presented to the parish council. And we're grateful to have the support of the parish council and, at the time of writing anyway, the majority of planning portal comments too. We also emailed, met and sat down at length with the residents of Lee House to hear from them and seek solutions to their concerns. We want to be good neighbours. We made significant design changes at their request. We tried to limit our impact as much as possible and be objectively better than the existing planning permission wherever we could. This is a change for the Green, but change does not have to mean harm. We note that the heritage expert found an overall neutral impact on the conservation area, and the planning expert found much in favour that would mitigate even less than substantial harm. In the words of the design guide, it is not easy to introduce modern architecture successfully into an area of traditional buildings, and we certainly know this to be true. But we're confident that this design represents the very best of Bamford, and we commend it to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And now I have Mr. Barnes, the architect.
Hi, yes, so I'm Chris Barnes. I'm the architect. I'm also Dan's partner and co-applicant as well. So, good design balances varied factors. This scheme meets or exceeds all planning policy, building regulations and guidance, sustainability, ecology requirements, as well as responding to the physical context, cultural heritage, placemaking, and light impacts on a constrained site. The officer justifies refusal only on the aspects of policy that are subjective, massing and fenestration, and an overbearing impact. His report argues that specific elements of the scheme depart from the design guide. The design guide is generic for the whole national park, and when we have deviated from the design guide, it has been specifically to respond to the conservation area and the character and setting of the site. And this is evidenced at length in the design and access statement provided as part of the application. For example, breaking the massing into two elements echoes three buildings around the Green, including next door. It reduces the building's sense of scale, works with existing levels and topography, it screens blank elevations that face onto the site, and it knits together surrounding buildings, maximising solar gains to the property and enabling the required PVs to face away from the conservation area. The report cites the design guide to call for symmetry in the fenestration, but symmetry is an exception to the Green, not a kind of main characteristic. Instead, the primary elevation reflects listed Mayfield cottage on the other side of the Green, sadly not noted in the report. To respond to other specifics on the Green, there are many windows and doors on gables, there are square dormers viewed from the area, and there are a variety of roof pitches. All these members would have seen on the site visit yesterday. Nothing in this design is new. The design is at least no worse in terms of form and massing than the existing planning permission. Its heights ensure the building better fits into the street scheme and contributes to the significance of the conservation area. It is shorter than its neighbours to the east and south, and all eaves are lower than the surrounding buildings. Nevertheless, the report says that the height will have an overbearing impact on Lee House. There is no policy that quantifies what overbearing means. We therefore took what we know, that the previous approval was deemed acceptable, and we looked at ways to improve on this, including narrowing the wall that faces onto Lee House, stepping the building away from the boundary, and ensuring that there was no overlay looking onto the private amenity space. Light levels have been demonstrated through the report that there's no material impact on daylight to the garden or the house. We collaborated with heritage, sustainability and landscape professionals to develop a proposal that is rich, characterful and well crafted. This building provides a much improved backdrop to the annual well dressing and nativity, far better than the alternative of a derelict site that has been an eyesore for more than 30 years. In summary, the design looks to the past without ignoring the realities of present and future. We want to build something that is an example of great design and we can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, members, we had a site visit yesterday. Any members wish to open the discussion? No? Right, Mike.
No, I was just concerned about the loft space. I get that at the sides you wouldn't be able to stand up in them, but is there sufficient room for someone to stand up in that loft space? Because that does look to me a bit like there's a third, potentially a third bedroom there.
It's not shown on the floor plans that there will be access to the loft, and as you can see there, it is quite restricted in the height. It does show that it have a boiler and other kind of infrastructure, so I don't think it proposes a third floor, no. It does have that appearance, but no.
So it is too small to be a room? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Any other members? Ken, thank you.
Committee always gets the difficult issues. I'm uncertain about this proposal. Insofar, well, on a number of levels, I think. I think it's unfortunate that apparently our conservation officers haven't given an opinion, given that it's within the conservation area. I'm at something of a... I have a dilemma, frankly. There's one slide, if we could show the ones that has that kind of frontage, that we are being... That one. We're being told that there's a problem with the scale, the height, and the rest of it. Yet, on that illustration, if it's a correct one, it seems to me that there's little differentiation between the heights of the buildings to either side. And the building to the left is gable onto the street, and there's a gable proposed as part of this application. We've just heard from the architect that fenestration is a subjective element. Well, I'm not entirely in accord with that, and I don't think that the elevation of what's being proposed is in keeping, really, with the overall fenestrations of Peak District buildings, of elements of the conservation area, and so on. And I think the massing of the proposal against the property to the left is an issue, but then on the other hand there is quite a wide space between that property and what is being proposed, and it is inevitable that when a gap in a settlement is infilled, it's going to have some impact on the kind of light and other visual amenities of adjoining properties. At the moment, Chair, I'm a bit undecided, though this is probably evident from my comments. But I do think that there is an element of overdevelopment on this site, and that a better design could be developed to utilise the space that is available more appropriately.
I don't think I disagree with that, actually. Any other members? Dermot.
Thanks, Chair. When you consider the scale of the site, there surely is limitations to, variations on design that you could probably put on a plot that size. For me, this is finely balanced, and I'd be very interested to hear what other people have got to say, because I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go on this. It is an eyesore, that site, and something needs to be done. But I consider the applicant and what other designs are possible on a site that small. So I'll wait to hear what my colleagues have got to say.
Martin.
Right, like Ken, I'm rather conflicted over this proposal. Whilst I very much support the prospect of a derelict site being suitably redeveloped, and very much liked the architect's drawings and heritage and design statement, which I found very useful. I still feel that this is overdevelopment on a very small site.
You see, if I can just sort of help move the discussion along a bit, I mean, I find the arguments about some of the fenestration compelling. I think there are issues around that. I'm less concerned about the roof angles and so forth, because when you look at it in the context of those other buildings, I'm not sure that there's a problem there. But I also have every sympathy with the neighbour about having what is in effect, a very tall building being put so close to their boundary, and I can see that the amenity arguments that the officers have put do have a weight. I do half wonder whether something very similar isn't possible by reversing it the other way around, so that the tall bit is the other way around, and something smaller nearer the neighbouring house. Is there something that can be argued about round there with a bit of a different approach?
I can't really predetermine anything that will come forward, but yes, my thought was, I mean, the form of the buildings would be a matter for design, but in terms of plan, handing the plan, because the neighbour on the other side has a blank gable, doesn't it?
Yes.
Could be a way of achieving a solution, but I'd just stress that there was pre-application advice in this case, and advice was given, and the application has come in with some minor changes, but essentially for the same proposal, and the applicants presumably would like a decision on this application.
Yeah. Okay. But you are satisfied that there are design solutions that could accommodate the brief that they've got here. Okay, they can accommodate the same brief, but do it by doing it a different way.
I suppose it depends what you mean by the same brief. I mean,
well, they're trying to accommodate this amount of space in this amount of land.
Yes, yeah, okay.
For whatever their needs are.
Okay. Well, the pre-application advice was primarily just a more simplified form, and I think reversing it or swapping it over on site, in my view, still has quite a complex form. It may address some of the amenity points, but I think our design guidance favours a simple form and layout for buildings. I think so, yeah.
But actually, in the context of this particular site, with those very tall buildings around it, something a bit complicated in front of it might actually help to soften the street scene. Have I lost something there? Sorry, Mike.
Yeah. Well, looking at the other four buildings, if we go back to that previous slide that was up, none of them. Oh, there's another one that shows three of them, doesn't there? But there's a fourth one, I presume, to the north. They're all staggered in. You know, they're not perfect rectangles, are they? No. So they've all got. They're basically two rectangles shoved together, and they're all different. As is the north, and the north one again is something quite different. So I can't see a problem on that. So I'm in agreement with you, Patrick.
Any other members wish to comment? Well, in the absence of any further contribution, I do believe there's a solution here. But I don't personally feel able to support this application in the form in which it now stands. And if nobody else is going to do it, I'm going to move it for refusal on the grounds stated. I'm not convinced about the impact upon the listed building, by the way, but I am convinced about the impact upon the conservation area and upon the neighbours. So I'm moving that for refusal on the grounds set out in the report. You're going to second that. Has anybody got any further comments to make on that? In that case, all those in favour of refusal on the ground set out. Those against? Anyone abstaining? 3 abstentions. Thank you. That is refused, but there is goodwill to try and come to a conclusion on this. Okay? And could somebody just, Mark, could you just nip in and find Ginny? Now, we are a bit ahead of time. I think that's Mr. Middleton, is it? Yes. It is. So do you mind if we now proceed with the next application, which is yours? Okay. Right. Mark, you're going to introduce this for us, please.
Try. Why's the mouse not working? Have we got a cursor? We have. Okay.
You can put the laser pen on.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll stick with the cursor. It's fine. Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. This application is for the proposed siting of 24 static holiday caravans with additional landscaping in place of 28 touring caravans and 2 tented camping areas at New Haven Holiday Park at New Haven. Just before I start, there's one correction to the report. Paragraph 39 suggests that there's a seasonal restriction on the touring caravans within this area of the holiday park. That's not the case. They can be used year-round for up to 28 days. So this is the holiday park as a whole. It's at the junction of the A515 at New Haven with the A5012. And the application site area itself is outlined in red, you can see here. The whole of the holiday park is outlined in blue. The holiday park is accessed off the A5012 up here. The former access, which was around here, was closed off as part of a previous permission. And the site extends to essentially where you can see all of the units on the plan here. So the southern part of the site is given over entirely to holiday lodges and static caravans. The central area here is a mix of those and also of touring units and touring spaces as well. And at the moment, as I'll show you in the next plan, this is a touring area as well. I'll go. I hadn't intended to do the photographs first, but they're here, so we will. So this is within the area to the north. So you can see this was, as you can see from the state of the trees, this was taken actually in August last year as part of a pre-application inquiry, and these are the trees bounding the site. So if I just go back one moment, these photos are all within this area here. So this is looking west across there. If I go back once more, if you see the grey buildings here, this helps with orientation. These are the facilities buildings serving the northern half of the site. And that's the edge of them you can see here. So you're looking west across it. So the road, the A5012, is running behind this line of trees here. And you're looking across an area which is for touring units. You will see that these statics are temporarily sited in there. They're not there in an occupied capacity. They're actually for sale there at that time when I visited the site. This is looking north through that same area, showing some of the pictures which you can see are in use. And looking northwest through the site again, so just towards the corner of this photo here is an area that's given over for camping. I'll show you a plan in a minute which shows you the exact land use as it's lawful as it stands. And then looking back east through the site, so again the highway runs, the A5012 runs behind these line of trees here. And this is looking down into another area which is currently given over to tented camping, which you'll see on the plans would become the new play area for the site. There's the existing play area, which is currently at the eastern edge of this area. And that's the site access off the A5012. And the area in question is, you can see there's a large man-made bund here, and the area is behind this area. That bund is much lower at other parts of the boundaries you'll see as we go through. So this is from the 5012 again, looking south, and the bund here is lower. As members who were on the site visit yesterday experienced, I've taken this whilst just standing on the road, of course. At that point, views into the site and of the units within the site is limited, even at this time of year when the trees aren't in leaf. If you're in a taller vehicle, as we were yesterday, such as the bus, then you do get views into the site between the trees. And this is taken from just off the 5012, closer to the junction with the 515. Again, the application site area being behind these trees here. And this is taken essentially from where this is the 5012 coming through here, and this is essentially the junction of it with the A515. So it's looking east towards the site again through the trees.
So this is the application site area in its current use. Everything in green is given over to touring caravans for 28-day restricted occupancy, but that can be throughout the year. The two red hatched areas that you can see there, those are the two areas that are currently given over to tented camping, and the yellow area is allowed, or is permitted for the storage of caravans through winter months. There's a proposed plan of the whole site. There's a lot of detail on there, and obviously it's only this top section, so I won't dwell on this because the next slide shows it much more clearly. So this shows the site as it's proposed. The 24 static caravan units go roughly in the same sort of position as the site is currently used for the touring caravans. This was previously an area given over to tented camping, which takes 2 of the static units. The other area of camping is given over, as you can see here, to a playground area, which is currently located over on this side of the site. This access is retained. There's a a sewage treatment plant here, which still requires vehicular access, so that's why this sort of spur road is on that side of the site there. Significantly, all of this sort of lighter green that you can see throughout the application site area, and indeed within the blue-lined area to the north here as well, is additional planting. So that's proposed as part of a planting and landscaping scheme. And as set out in the report, officers also recommend a condition for a woodland management plan, which would allow the woodland throughout the edge of the site, which is currently unprotected, to be retained, managed, supplemented, replaced as necessary as time progressed. These are visualisations from the site from above, so I'd stress that these aren't actual photographs in both instances, but that shows the touring layout, and that shows the intended layout with the static. So if I just flip between the two, you can see there's some additional planting comes in around and between the units, but obviously that's indicative rather than anything else. This is just to show some sections through, so you'll see 3 images after this one, all taken with the A5012 at the edge of the site here, coming around to B and to C, and these really just show the way the site is screened as it exists. So this is the sort of the easternmost of those. So the road is over here, and you can see the bunding at this point is elevated from the road, which does limit views into the site, even though this is actually quite elevated. If you anticipate that this is more than 2 metres in height at this point, any views are going over the top of there. So this end of the site is well screened by tall bunding. This is additional planting that's proposed. This is the existing planting here. Further along, and you can see that bunding height is somewhat reduced, which does allow some further views through, although the screening is still, particularly in the summer months, is still well established. Underplanting is proposed here, which would certainly help. As you can see, the representations of the trees is actually relatively accurate insofar as lower down, of course, you've just got the trunks, which don't do as much to screen, and this underplanting would improve that quite significantly once established. And then finally, this is the westernmost of those sections through where the bunding height doesn't actually change that much, but the heights within the site are lower. So the buildings, sorry, I shouldn't say buildings because they're not, the caravans are at a lower level, and so less prominent within the site. And again, you can see additional planting here, and that's just showing some of the indicative planting within the site itself. And this is to just give you an indication of the units. I expect members are fairly familiar with the appearance of a static caravan, and these are quite typical of that. You'll see there's a condition recommended that secures the appearance of those in terms of their colour. At the moment, the touring units that would come and go from the site are unrestricted in that regard, of course. This application does give the opportunity to control that so that any viewers into the site are seeing units that are more recessive, so we would be able to control it to a muted palette of colours that are more sympathetic to their setting. Subject to the conditions set out in the report, Chair, the application is recommended for approval. I should say at this point that the application does represent, or the recommendation represents, a departure from policy. The application is for the siting of static caravan units. Policy RT3 doesn't support that. It says that they will not be permitted. The supporting text provides the exceptional circumstances in which they can be considered, and that includes sites where they would have a very low impact in the landscape. We consider this to be one, and we also consider the application to represent an opportunity to improve the screening of the site as it currently stands. And those are the reasons for the recommendation contrary to the policy RT3. But because it's a departure, that would mean that if members support the recommendation, the application would need to be deferred to come back next month with a policy paper explaining the implications of that departure. Thanks, Chair.
Right, thank you very much indeed. We have the one speaker, Mr. Middleton. You've been watching events, so you know how it works. Yes.
Good morning. My name is David Middleton and I'm the appointed agent acting on behalf of Park Holidays in relation to this planning application. The subject application seeks consent for the siting of 24 static holiday caravans in lieu of 28 touring caravans and 2 tented camping areas on the northern element of New Haven Holiday Park, together with environmental improvements. In this sense, the development will be confined to the existing limits of the holiday park and does not seek any extension to the approved boundaries of the site in which to accommodate these holiday caravans. Furthermore, the application does not seek to provide holiday caravans in locations that have not already been found acceptable in planning and land use terms. The supporting reports and assessments provided as part of the application positively conclude that there will be no adverse landscape or visual impacts arising from the development. In this sense, the LVIA fully considers the application and concludes that there will be no significant adverse effects on landscape resource, landscape character or visual amenity, with potential beneficial effects being secured. Similarly, the ecological, transport, land contamination, arboricultural, flood risk and drainage reports that have been produced are also positive, and there are no adverse issues arising from this development, with no objections from any statutory consultees. New Haven Holiday Park itself is a significant local employer, providing much needed part-time and full-time employment to the local community. The economic sustainability of the holiday park is therefore of fundamental importance, with the planning application helping to enhance the level of local employment associated with the park and the standard of accommodation on offer. Additional economic benefits arising from the development will include the employment of local contractors, tradesmen and business as part of the development process and thereafter through the ongoing maintenance of the holiday park. In this sense, members will be aware of the guidance at paragraph 85 of the NPPF, which states that significant weight should be placed on the need to support economic growth and productivity. The planning application is in accordance with local policies set out within the Peak District Local Plan and provides the necessary justification in relation to policy RT3, as we've already heard. This is demonstrated by similar planning permissions at Ashbourne Heights Caravan Park and within the Case Officers Committee report today. In considering this planning application, the Case Officer has provided a recommendation to grant planning approval, acknowledging the environmental benefits and economic benefits that will be delivered. We therefore trust that a positive decision can be made in line with this officer recommendation. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, members.
Thank you very much. Right, members, we did a site visit here yesterday as well. Any member wish to start the discussion? Ken Richardson.
Yeah, I didn't go on site visit, but I have got a static caravan, and I just wonder about the restriction on 28 days, because static caravans do represent a real valuable investment, and to only use it for 28 days is, in my mind, not a good return on your investment. And also, I've got a static on a small caravan site. It's not in Peak District, but the age profile suggests that older people buy them because they're that expensive. So therefore, they've got grandkids, maybe, and 6 weeks holidays and all half terms and whatever. So we need it's up 28 days. So I just wonder about that, whether it's a disincentive to actually buy one of these vans.
Thank you very much. Can we have, before we move on, can we have some clarity on that point, Liz?
As is set out in the report, The application itself, as it came in, suggested a different condition allowing longer term occupation. However, our policy position is that up to 28 days is what represents holiday occupancy. Our plan's very clear that anything above that is considered a more permanent occupation, and as such we require any holiday accommodation of any type to be restricted in that manner. We put that to the applicant's agent through the application process, and given that they'd set out that, as you suggested, Ken, there might be issues of viability in relation to that, we asked them if they were prepared to accept that condition or whether they would prefer to have the application refused, with the right of appeal against that. They've decided to accept the application with the condition, or permission with the condition. Of course, that doesn't prejudice their right to challenge that condition after the fact if they wanted to.
Can I be absolutely clear? Half a second, Mike. I'll call you next. Can I be absolutely clear? Is there a policy which says that this is the 28-day?
There is.
There is.
Yes.
In what, the MPPF?
No,
in the development management policy.
Correct. Yes.
And is it 28 days in the entire year? Or
It is.
I mean, could it be 28 days? Could it be 3 weeks in February and 3 weeks in August? And that would break the...
No, it's 28 days by any one person in any calendar year.
But if they go into Caravan A for 3 weeks in February and Caravan B for 3 weeks in August, are they breaking the condition?
No.
Okay, right, okay. That's what you're trying to get at, I think, isn't it?
Well, no, my caravan, it's not all year round.
Yeah, yours is, and you can occupy it whenever you want. So,
I've got to
do
prove...
you want to finish this one off and I call Mike?
I'll just add to, there's a point in which recreational caravans to holiday Inn become effectively dwellings, and our housing policy clearly wouldn't allow the creation of dwellings on this site, even as second homes. So that's why our recreation policy has this 28-day occupancy restriction, because that's how we as a national park define holiday accommodation. That's a very strong principle that we've had for a while, and occupation of these caravans as second homes would not be contributing to the national park's purpose for recreation. So it's about providing a type of caravan site where people can come and enjoy the national park rather than have a second home. That makes sense.
Okay, so you move down to Ashbourne's Heights for the next 4 weeks, right? Mike.
I can see the school summer holidays presenting a problem, and I would have thought we could come up with a workaround that would take in that period, which is effectively from around the 3rd or 4th week in July through to the first few days in September. And I really can't see a problem with that, because what may happen is that you have different family members visiting the caravan. You might have one person who's there the whole, or two people who are there the whole time, but...
I take your point, but I think these are very good discussions for when we come on to reviewing the local plan, by the sounds of things. Ken.
Thank you, Chair. Previous discussions notwithstanding, I think, I've worked in the Peak District since 1982, and I frequently use the 515 and the 5012, and it took me a long while to realise that there were caravans, there were static homes in this location. It's extremely well hidden in the landscape, and it seems to me that this application, it's a change of use of this particular land, but it seems to me to be appropriate. The issues as outlined perhaps by the agent, things like the woodland management plan as a condition, the travel plan, the control over colour of the structures, it all seems to me to be quite positive. So I would support the application. In fact, I'll move the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other members wish to contribute? Ginny and then Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. In the congested roads that we have around us with touring caravans, I think this is a very positive thing to move from touring caravans to static caravans.
Ginny, could you put your microphone on, please?
My concern is the screening, and as was identified, part of the screening on the roadside is ash trees, which ash trees are obviously suffering from ash dieback. So can we ensure when we do the woodland plan that that is taken into account, that we need to be putting some back screening in case those trees have to be removed? Otherwise, I'm happy to second the proposal.
Yeah, it was a question about the climate change bit in the report, that there's not much you can do in terms of climate change, but obviously it's very difficult. So it'll be really easy to access this site by bicycle because of the Tissington Trail. Is that right? Is it the Tissington Trail, the High Peak Trail is very close?
They're both accessible from here.
But generally people are going to be going from the site out onto the trails, and it's going to require car access to get to it. Is there a requirement for EV provision? Is EV charging provision a possibility? Because with the number of vehicles coming in here, that would seem like a reasonable thing to require.
Would you like to comment on that? And if necessary, we'll ask Mr. Middleton to comment.
Yes, we've obviously reached a point where we're happy that the overall balance of all material considerations is such that we didn't require further measures. If members are minded to think that further measures are required, then we could require a scheme of climate change mitigation measures, which may include EV chargers, to be submitted and approved. I think perhaps if we were to define that specifically to EV chargers without consultation with the applicant and agent, there's a risk that that might not be a suitable provision for any number of reasons. But we could certainly put a condition on to require further measures to be agreed if that would be.
Mr. Middleton, would you like to just come forward? And yes, please. And have you any view on that before we take a view?
Sorry, there was a point made at the site visit yesterday about the environmental and green credentials of the caravans, which are obviously they're factory built, they're not like buildings, so they're built to BS 3632, which ensures that they're suitable for year-round occupation and that they're a sustainable form of development because they're constantly renewed in the factory as different practices are brought in. The EV charging points, again, I don't think we'd have any problem with a scheme to be agreed. I think it'd have to be commensurate with the development. It wouldn't work practically to have an EV charging point for every unit. When we accept that type of condition on other park holidays parks, it's generally a scheme to be agreed, and we would put a number of EV charging points at key points within the site. So they're not only benefiting the development we're discussing today. If we put them up at the reception building, for example, or the sales office, people visiting the site and other parts of the park could benefit. So a scheme to be agreed condition would be fine, just not one that would mandate every unit on that part of the site to have an individual EV charging point, because that's not really practical or workable.
Thank you very much. If you could turn your microphone off, I'd be grateful. Matt.
Yeah, that would be completely acceptable as far as I'm concerned, because I recognise the difficulty of getting EV chargers into bits of the national park, and so if that's possible, then that would be great.
And the proposer and seconder are happy with that, are you? Yes, that's good. And anybody else wish to talk on this particular application? Well, yes.
So yeah, as Mark mentioned, if members are minded to, and I recognise that it's an unusual one because officers have found scope through material considerations here to find an approval. There is a strong policy conflict, and that's really to protect the landscape of the national park, but also to consider the kind of recreation and tourism, as Adam's points were making, that it's about people enjoying the national park. And our policies therefore refer to farm settings and traditional buildings and campsites where people are out in the landscape. So that's why these sort of sites are in principle not supported, but there are exceptions to that. And so I think it's very much about the nature of exceptions and exploring that, and also the impact on policy, bearing in mind we're going through a local plan review. So So our standing orders, so it's paragraph 1.48 of standing orders, where there is a strong conflict with authority principles in policy like that, do ask for a referral back to a subsequent planning committee where we can just set those out. And that in particular would be useful for the local plan process, as Patrick mentioned, about the impact, about the principle, about the market, about the number of days to stay, all those things can come into that. So, as well as the wider things about sustainability of the site, BNG contributions, transport and all those things that come with that. So yeah, it will be a minded to recommendation, I think, subject to referral.
Okay, thank you very much. Ken?
I did omit to say in my contribution that I took into account the conflict with policy, but thought in the circumstances, this particular site, it was an appropriate exception to policy. But I recognise what Brian is saying.
We have actually done it before, just down the road at the Rivendell, the same sort of thing, but that was something different. Okay, it has been proposed and seconded, subject to that additional condition. All those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? One. And it'll come back to us next meeting, and we can all vote against it then, can't we? Thank you very much. The problem we have, members, is that it's only 11:05. You're not talking enough, and the result is that the meeting is going on rather quicker than we imagined, and it's not going to be 11:30 before we're due for the next item. So unless the applicant and his agent turn up sooner, in which case you'll all be rounded up, can we have you back here for 11:30, please?
Could we move to item 11?
You can if you want. It'll only take about a second. It won't make any difference. Right, let's deal with item 11 then. It's the legal report, new appeals lodged and appeals decided. Nothing very special in that, is there? Who's?
Yeah, so yeah, the only one I would note again, and it's in a similar kind of vein to the last application, but the appeal allowed at Booth Farm, Hollinsclough, some disappointment by the officers that the inspector in that report, in that decision, didn't refer to the DM policies which set out the exceptions for pods and shepherd's huts and the like. It's really just taken on a kind of on balance view about the acceptability of pods in that location. So he's made a view that they were acceptable in that farm setting, but actually that is contrary to our exceptions. We would normally be looking for camping pods in wooded settings and a single shepherd's hut potential alongside the other potentials that exist on a farm, like tented sites and like conversions. So it does start to blur the edges of what we regard as appropriate structures in certain locations. I have referred similar cases to the planning inspectorate with no response, so it's becoming frustrating for us, but I think it's certainly an issue through these appeals, again, to lodge in the plan review, to really think about what we want to hold strong lines on and where these new products and options are.
I do think probably when we come to rewrite the local plan, we need some greater clarity in some of these areas about the purpose of the policy and what you're trying to do and so on and so forth. Yeah. Okay, report be noted? Yes, all agreed, thank you. So we'll see you at 11:30 unless the whistle goes earlier. Okay? Right, we have, it's now 25 past 11. We're slightly earlier for the next item on the agenda, but I think we all want to get on with the business. And the item is the chapel in Elton. You're dealing with this, are you?
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, the application is, I'll try and give a bit of history. The application is for, I don't know if this, so this building here, which is a Methodist church. In 2015, an application was sought to convert this building into holiday accommodation. That application was refused because it was deemed to be a community asset, but also there was implications with regards to the impact on this property, which is Lawson Cottage. However, since that permission was refused, the owners of Lawson Cottage purchased the building and basically advised that they would use it for community use based on it would be used for a model railway that the people could come and visit and have a look. The applicant, however, put in an application recently to convert this to ancillary accommodation and to a holiday let. That was considered by officers and a delegated decision was arrived at that would be contrary to the policies of the core strategy and contrary to policies HC4 of the core strategy and DMS2 of the development management plan. The reason for that is that there'd been no marketing exercise to establish was this community facility, being a church, still potentially required to fulfil a community use. Now, no marketing exercise was done on that regard, and the application was refused on that policy principle, and also a secondary one to do with the impact of a flue that was proposed on it and a mezzanine, the mezzanine floor, and the impact of viewing that through the building. So further to that, the applicant has now submitted a letter that was prepared and sent to them by the parish council, where the parish council themselves have advised that, in their view, there is no need for this building to perform a function as a community facility anymore, and that they also, in response to this current application, advised that backed up the letter that was sent to the applicant, basically say they didn't feel that there was any need for that as a community facility. As the parish council were in general support, this is why the application is being now presented to members for them to make a decision on this application. The officer's view remains that this is a community asset. It has not been demonstrated fully through appropriate marketing that there is no requirement for this to be a community asset. I'll take questions, Chair. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. So the issue here is one of principle, and we're going to be spoken to by, I think, a supporter, Miss Cartwright. Hello. And then the agent. Would you like to come and sit in here? I think you've been before us before, haven't you, at some stage? No, you haven't. I'm confusing you with somebody else in that case. Please sit down, and in front of you, you've got a little red button. Press that on, and you now have 3 minutes in which to address us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me speak here today. I'm Michelle, and I'm here with my partner Tina. Lawson Cottage has been our home since 2016 when we moved to Elton. You'll be able to see from the plans why purchasing this chapel at a public auction was so important to us. The building is surrounded by our home on 3 sides. The back of the chapel has 2 large windows that look directly onto our patio and garden. One side is next to the pathway to our back garden, and the other side faces our outhouses. We believe the ownership of the chapel was essential to our privacy, and any other owner could have a major adverse impact to our life. To secure the chapel was as much an emotional challenge for us as a financial one. As far as we can tell, little or no maintenance has been carried out by the previous owners for years, and therefore the chapel requires a significant investment to re-establish itself as an attractive part of Elton's main road, rather than the dilapidated building it currently is. We believe the best way we can achieve this is by incorporating the chapel into our home. Both Tina and I have 85-year-old widowed parents. The chapel can provide a place for long-term visits and for potential future care, whilst enabling to have independent living. Also, all our family live far away, making one-day visits impractical. The conversion of the chapel would enable us to offer them extended stays, whilst providing both us and them privacy and space. We have engaged all along with the Parish Council, who have voiced no concerns about this application and have been fully supportive throughout in their responses. They have made clear that there are more than enough underutilised community spaces to meet current and future needs, and that each is in need of funding. We know this firsthand because we are long-serving volunteers supporting activities to bring in funds for the upkeep of these buildings. We also discussed with the Parish Council whether they felt Elton needed its own shop. This was seen to adversely impact the Winster shop, which services many of the needs of Elton residents but still battles to make ends meet. In summary, we have sought to come up with a plan to restore the chapel building that has 0 negative impact. We believe our plan offers what no other plan could, with the additional off-road parking, the required bike and bins storage, and access to essential utilities from Lawson Cottage. The solution would have no detrimental impact to our neighbours, whom you can see from their submissions also support us in the proposal. Our investment in the building will enhance the appearance of the chapel to our neighbours and visitors, and ultimately our own home. We therefore respectfully request your approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And would like to resume your seat, and then Nick Marriott will take over from you. Thank you. I hope that wasn't done by one of our planning officers.
Harold's enjoying this beautiful countryside I call home. You've been told by the case officer that the chapel is a community facility. I agree with the principle of that statement, that where a chapel is offering an existing function as such, to lose it without due assessment of the need may lead to the adverse impact upon the needs of that community. However, by definition, to lose a community facility, the community must be benefiting from it in the first place, at least in recent history. The chapel in question closed its doors to a congregation 13 years ago, which follows the merging of Methodist churches and the closure of similar chapels all over the park. It stood entirely without function for 2 years after closure, until an Elton resident came forward who sought a private tenancy agreement enabling him to use the space to build a model railway. He's held that private agreement for over 10 years. Throughout that period, it has never been used for a community purpose. In addition to that, as just outlined by Michelle in her presentation to you, the applicants have engaged very actively with the Parish Council to seek their input regarding proposals and whether they saw a need for the building in the community. Their response has been emphatic that they support the proposals and that they do not see a need for any other facilities within the community because it is currently well served. This also accords with the findings of Elton and Grattan Parish statement produced by the park in 2019. The applicants were fortunate enough to be able to secure the chapel at public auction approximately 18 months ago. the desire to own it being driven largely by the fear of the unknown. The intimate relationship between Lawson Cottage and the chapel being key to their decision, as the chapel basically sits in the garden of Lawson Cottage and doesn't benefit from any curtilage at all. The tabled proposal is a great low-impact solution that secures a sustainable new use and doesn't conflict with anybody's purposes or aspirations. I strongly believe the purpose of the policy is not to establish a new community use. It's to protect the community where there is potential loss identified. There is no loss to the community in this situation. It's unequivocal that the building hasn't served a community function for over a decade, and that the community has not been crying out for a facility. Its conversion would secure a new use for an otherwise redundant building, and in the present form overcomes all manner of planning issues which without the current applicants couldn't be resolved. I also bring to your attention the officer's suggestion that the proposed parking space be removed by condition. However, should you be minded to approve. However, speaking with the case officer yesterday, he did confirm the physical works to form the space is actually permitted development. Only the alteration of the actual vehicular crossing requires planning permission, i.e. the physical impact of the works to which the officer objects is permitted development. However, I've spoken to the applicants, and if you are minded to move and you think that is necessary, they are willing to forego the parking space.
Thank you very much. Okay. Something that hadn't occurred to me when I read the report, and the planning principle is clear, and it's one that we would, in most situations, absolutely support. But the point made by Michelle Cartwright in the first instance, and then I think to a certain extent by Nick Marriott, is this, that if you convert this to a community use of some sort, whether that's going to be literally a place of community activity or whether it's going to be something like a small shop or factory unit, the impact of that on their own property could be considerable. That nobody in their right mind owning a property in this environment would want it to be put to a use which is going to interfere with their privacy and with the quietness of their establishment. Have we sort of applied our mind to that and come to a conclusion on it?
Yeah, I'll ask this, Gareth, sorry. I mean, presumably when the owners purchased the property, they purchased the property in the knowledge that it was adjacent to a church. That is its lawful use. And so that situation was existing. And while it might not be preferred or ideal, that was the situation. I understand, having bought the property, an unwillingness to go back to that situation. But it's a question of, should those desires drive what are the policy aspirations to retain community facilities? Because in planning terms, its lawful use is for a church. So whether should the fact that someone has purchased a property, we can't control who purchased the property, should that drive the planning decisions? I don't think it should. And it might be entirely possible that the building could be used for something like a shop and have obscure glazing put in those back windows. And it could operate perfectly fine. So I don't necessarily agree that it's an impossible amenity situation.
This is a heritage building. Would you be wanting to put obscure glazing in what is obviously a little heritage building? I mean, I'm just thinking through the physical practicalities.
It's already got obscure glazing.
Is it? And you in all the windows? Oh, is it? Okay. I mean, I can't see properly on this. Right, okay. Well, there we are. Members. Ken Richardson first, Matt Butler next.
Well, it's quite obvious that it's had a private lease for a number of years, which has frustrated the policy. So I can't see any problem with this at all.
Okay, thank you very much. Matt?
Yeah, so firstly, I need to declare an interest in this. I'm the District Council ward member for Elton, and have had lots of conversations with people about this, and have heard from from the applicants before, and I know how much the parish council support this application. So whilst I am declaring an interest, I am also saying that that it is supported by the parish council to a significant extent.
Thank you very much. Ginny Priestley.
Yes, I recognise that we need to protect community assets, but it's not been a community asset for a long time. And it obviously is going to need a lot of work on it, a lot of money spent on it. And on that basis, why would you buy that building, and would you be able to fund doing it up for a community purpose? I think we should take advice from the parish council, who are very clear that they do not need another community facility, and it would be really good to see this building loved and cared for. So I don't have a problem with approving it.
Okay. Kath Potter, and then Mike Chaplin. Kath?
Thank you, Chair. A lot of our villages have either Methodist churches or Wesleyan Reformed churches, and over the centuries they've been a great benefit to their communities. But now, with communities that are less religious, we have to find something positive to do with these buildings. I go to, in the next village, Winster, I go to a little Wesleyan Reformed there, and it's only a matter of time before that one becomes redundant. We've got to think positively. If somebody's prepared to do something about with these wonderful old buildings, then we should allow them to do it, in my estimation. So I would support this wholeheartedly.
Mike Chaplin.
Yes, I agree with Kath and Ginny, and yeah, on this. We didn't have a site visit to this one, but that picture, I think that says it all, really. The proximity of the building to the house. There would be all kinds of problems were someone to try and bring this back into community use, and I can't see that happening anytime soon. And the parish have made it perfectly clear that they have other buildings in the village and nearby that are already meeting that community purpose.
Thank you very much. Matt, you wanted to come back, then Lee.
Yeah, I think this is a particular example, and I'd be really cautious about setting any precedent for that we should be putting chapels in, former chapels into other uses, because I think that this the case for this, the fact that this is surrounded on three sides by the applicant's property means that this is virtually nothing else is feasible. But that wouldn't be the case with ones in other places. So I think it would be really important, from my point of view, that this isn't seen as setting a precedent for converting chapels and other community buildings, because we should be retaining community buildings where we possibly can. But I think in this case, it's a very specific special example.
Thank you for that. Yes, Lee.
Thank you, Jack. I just think, well, obviously it is an heritage asset that I'm quite happy to see this going forward, but I'd be interested to know from officers what sort of conditions they would like to put on as part of the, if we were minded to accept go against officers' recommendation and accept this.
We can get to that, but I just wanted to say a couple of things as well. I mean, obviously as a chapel, people were visiting the site and using the site, there was activity around it, and that coexisted perfectly well. I think it's a very important point you make, Matt, really, and obviously when we design policies, we're thinking about the sustainability of places. There has been a historic loss of community facilities, steady loss over time, and it's bit by bit, and sometimes it's as a result of decisions like this. We do see other small buildings and other communities that use these spaces. Sometimes they're important spaces. I think the one in Froggatt, for instance, where there aren't many places to meet. And you might say there's a difference here. There might be other places to meet. But I think it's another case where there's an important policy principle where we should probably refer this back and just explore those points. And I'm not saying, you know, I'm not trying to place any judgment on the member's view here. There might be an exception to be made for the reasons you're giving, but it is an important principle about spaces, about vibrancy, about meeting spaces. And we're not actually saying in the reasons here that we're against the character reasons, you know, the reasons how you could convert and create a new use successfully. That isn't part of that here, but I think it's about mixture of land uses and the mix of uses within a community. So that has to be explored again in the context of local plan. You know, what are these kind of spaces to be put to? And are there, as a kind of sharpening up that we could make in policy, or is it case by case? But I would just prefer to just reflect on that. And I'm not saying that it should necessarily change the member's view, but if you're minded to go down a path, we should explore those issues.
Could we also have an answer to Lee's question about what conditions might be added to this if we were to approve it?
Yeah, I have prepared some. Well, first of all, we want to put time limit condition on, and that the second one would be that it would the permission would be in accordance with the plans submitted. We would want details prior to the provision of the type, colour and positioning of the solar panels which are proposed on the rear roof slope. If I can just take members back to, you'll see that this is, if I can get this onto there, where is it? Right, this is the roof slope of the chapel. This is the roof slope of the Lawson Cottage. So we feel that contextually, given the sort of set-in that that putting solar panels on the rear roof slope on balance would be acceptable, in that its benefits in addressing climate change outweigh the harm. This would be visible from the public footpath that runs through this location, but officers consider that that can be subject to a condition. We would want the provision of and details of any replacement or additional windows and doors on the building. We would want details of any replacement render, its colour treatment, and that to be provided prior to occupation. There would be, we feel that the additional car parking space, which does need planning permission in this location, by taking the wall down and widening this space here, would have a harmful impact on that street scene. It would create a 3-bay parking right in front of this building. The Methodist Church has no parking associated with it. If it was used as a church, parking would be within the street. So we feel that we feel it's reasonable to not require a further parking space where that would harm the setting of that former listed building. So next,
Sorry, what does that mean? Does it mean you'd have a condition saying there shall not be an additional car parking space? Is that what you're saying?
no, so notwithstanding the approved plans, the car parking space detailed on the drawing shall not be provided.
Okay, that's
the
fine,
reason
so,
for that
okay,
is...
Thank you, that's okay, that's right.
We would need a condition that the building remain as ancillary accommodation to Lawson Cottage, or that it is a holiday let, as also applied for, that would in ownership still remain ancillary to Lawson Cottage and couldn't be sold off as a separate entity. We would also need to apply a holiday occupancy condition for the standard 28 days. And also we would look a condition with respect to ecological enhancements.
Okay, that's it, is it? Okay, thank you very much. Somebody put their hand up. Ken.
Thank you, Chair. In many ways, Brian has said what I was running through my mind, but it was sparked by Matt's comment about setting precedent. And I think it's worth, I would add to what Brian has said, that the policies are there for a purpose, in order to sustain our thrive and enable our communities to thrive. And it just because the applicant and the parish don't identify a community benefit from that could be provided through that property doesn't necessarily mean that one doesn't exist. I mean, that's the whole purpose, it seems to me, of the policy, is to establish whether or not there are other benefits that could accrue through a different use of that building. And it's that policy element. My fear is that we need to be mindful that we shouldn't be setting precedences by not going through the hoops that are there to demonstrate whether or not a need exists or a provision could exist, by just accepting willy-nilly the opinions of second, third or fourth parties. It's a point I think I'm not against the proposal in principle, just as Brian wasn't, but I think there are hoops that need to be gone through to demonstrate that the needs that our policies are identified to are there to identify have been met.
Yes, I have to say that I'm with you when it comes to simply considering the views of the parish council, because although they are of importance, it needs more than that. I have to say what convinces me about the way this debate is going at the moment is that the proximity of this building to the adjoining house is such that at best it's unfair, but it's probably wrong to assume that some sort of community of use in this day and age, with this day and age as standard, what happened when they built it is another question. But in this day and age, to sort of try and inflict an alien use of that sort is a very risky thing to do, and with no good purpose at the end of the day. But what I don't have, can I just finish? What I don't have is a motion from anybody. Ken?
Couple of points. On possible conditions, if you go to paragraph 73, it does ask for a basic recording of the building and any alterations for the heritage purposes. The other point is that the community use has been declared null and void because it's been in private use for a number of years. So it's irresponsible to try and impose it now. And I would formally move acceptance of this application.
Is that seconded? Okay.
Can I make a point on that, please?
The lawful use of the building is as a church. I appreciate your point that it's been in other use, but we have no evidence that the use of the building has accrued lawfulness for any other purpose. The applicant could, as an alternative means, potentially make an application for a lawful development certificate for that. But without that, we don't have any evidence on the use. But I appreciate the point that you're making. I won't repeat what Brian and Ken said, but it may well be the case that there is no community need for this building, and that might be where we come to. I think the point where officers are coming at is that we have a policy that sets out the authority's requirements for evidence. We as an authority have set that policy, the evidence that we need, and we have to be very careful if we're wanting to set aside the need for that evidence on any particular proposal, because that could be repeated elsewhere. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Sorry, did somebody else make a point?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry, I did overlook the archaeology requirement, and I also think I didn't refer to the a condition we would require with regards to removal of permitted development rights for alterations and extensions to the building. We'd want to see that to preserve its character and appearance.
Okay. Now, that was moved by Ken. Sorry, did somebody second it or not? No. Mike seconded it, right. So the motion is that this be approved on the conditions that have been outlined. Sorry, Ginny?
I just want to ask the question based on what Ken has said. If we were going to canvass for this as a community use, how would that go about? This is private property. I'm just want to establish how would we find out that there was a community requirement for it.
I'll just read what the policy says. Evidence of thorough viability assessment and a marketing exercise which the applicant would undertake with a commercial property agent sustained over at least 12 months to sell or let the building for alternative community uses or facilities, including local needs affordable housing. I think in this case we've come to the conclusion it couldn't work as a separate dwelling. The policy also requires evidence of marketing of the property through the economic development team of the district council. And then there's a requirement for the contact with the parish council, which obviously has already happened. But the first two elements of the policy haven't been complied with yet.
Right, I have it moved and seconded. If this is carried, then I do think we ought to be clear that the reason that this is going ahead is because of the proximity of this to the house and the relationship between the two. Is that accepted? And that would be the note that appears in the minute.
Well, Chair, as well, I've mentioned that I would want to refer that back. So
I've got that part of it, and that will happen. On that basis, all those in favour of approving this? I'm sorry, I'm going to put mine up, actually. And the one person who's against... abstaining. Right. That decision then stands in abeyance until the next meeting, when it comes back to us with whatever report it is that the officers wish to accompany it by. Okay? Thank you very much. And we're now going to move on to agenda item 9, which is Broadway Lane, Priestcliffe, Taddington. Sorry, what's happening?
Nick wants to know what the status.
What?
Nick thinks it's been approved now.
No, it's not been approved now. What the
Quiet, please.
No, we have the planning officer under our standing orders has the right to call this in for a further report to the next meeting, because this is a decision which is clearly contrary to normal policy. And it is a part of the procedures of the authority, and it comes back to us next time with his report. It is possible that this might be reversed at the next meeting, but you can make your own guesses about that. But it has to come back to us. Okay? Right.
Thanks.
Is Miss Hensby here? Oh, hello. Yes, you are. Thank you. So we'll move on now to Broadway Lane, Priestcliffe, Taddington. Agenda item 9. And Mark, you're going to introduce it, and we'll let our guests leave. And we'll all settle in, and that's okay. Would you like to introduce this? This is one that's been before us a couple of times before, so. Can we have a conversation at this end, please?
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the conversion of Stone Field Barn to create a 5-bedroom property with an integrated 1-bedroom annex off Broadway Lane near to Priestcliffe, Taddington. Just one correction to the report before I begin. Paragraph 10, it makes reference to a 3-bedroomed property. This is, in fact, a 5-bedroomed property as proposed. So you can see the application site on the screen here. It's a field barn located in open countryside. The nearest settlement is Priestcliffe, which is a hamlet roughly 0.7 kilometres to the southwest. And you can see here, Broadway Lane and Bulter Lane, they join at this position. These aren't metalled roads, as you'll see in the application photos as we go through, with a further right of way running roughly north-south past the site. The blue line is in ownership, of course, and the application site area is in red around the barn here. So this is viewing the property from the south. As you go up the road, so the barn you can see is here. You can see the landscape character is pastoral fields, fairly regular in form, and a fairly open landscape with occasional tree cover. And this is the south elevation of the barn. The barn, essentially, its principal elevation is at the moment, and would remain the principal elevation as proposed for conversion. And the west gable, you can see the irregular gable there with a slight existing, long-standing offshot to the rear, essentially. This is the access into the site. So the land that you can see enclosed within the wall here does not form part of the application site area. That follows around this wall here. So all of the land to this side effectively would be curtilage. It shows you the gable. You can see the former stair to the first floor there. And this is the rear of the barn. So this elevation faces north, which is much more blank as you'd expect of a traditional barn, and you can see the offshot that I referred to previously there. And a view from a little bit further along the track, so you're looking northwest in this instance, and northeast. Again, these are really just to show it in its context, as you'll have seen set out in the report. Officers' view is that it's an isolated barn in the landscape, and so these are important for context. The rear elevation. And this shows the site plan as proposed. So you can see a residential curtilage proposed to the front, where there would be a parking area. To the left side of the barn here is proposed to be grassed. And then at the moment, this is an open field that the barn opens into, as you saw in the photographs. It's proposed to introduce a wooden fence boundary to enclose part of that field to garden at the rear of the barn. You can see bins would be stored to the side. And there's a visual of that which annotates that a little bit more. The access is essentially the access as it exists at the moment, so that is the existing field gate position. And here's the existing principal elevation as you saw it in the photographs. At the moment, this opening is blocked, but you can see it would be reopened and reinstated, so the proposal works with the building's existing openings. And the rear. You see a new flue to the rear, small roof lights. There's an air source heat pump to the rear wall. And the gable. Largely unchanged again. Again, you can see the flue there rising up the rear of the building. And the other gable. With the openings reinstated to full height there. Floor plans. So this is the existing ground floor and proposed. If I could just flick back and forth between the two, that allows you to see the subdivision changes that are proposed. Relatively limited at ground floor. Some enclosure for bedrooms and ensuite, and the enclosure of a fire protected porch. And then at first floor, and this is where the change to layout is more significant as addressed in the report. So at the moment it's relatively open, as you'd expect from the first floor of a traditional barn, which would have been largely hayloft. And that's to be more significantly subdivided to provide a 5-bedroom property at that. And the roof plan is existing and proposed, so you see the flue and the 3 small roof lights to the rear. So, as Patrick mentioned at the start, some members might remember this site from a previous application around 12 months ago, which came before committee, was similar to the current proposal in a lot of regards. That was refused by members in line with the recommendation ultimately having been initially deferred. On its own merits, officers have very similar concerns this time to those that were raised last time. The barn is isolated within the landscape, And our view is that its proposed conversion would not conserve its historic character as a traditional field barn, and in doing so it also domesticate the rural and agricultural character of the landscape at this location. That view is supported by the professional advice of our landscape architect and of our senior archaeologist, as well as being shared by the parish council. And for those reasons, Chair, the application is recommended for refusal as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one speaker, Ms Hemsby. Yes, you do.
Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to bring my application before you again today. I'd like to address some major concerns that's led me to believe that my application hasn't been analysed or processed properly. Before receiving notification of the application's referral to today's meeting, I'd requested to amend my application where I intended to revert back to an updated version of the 3-bedroomed application previously submitted. Unfortunately, my request was refused. However, upon reading the recommendation for refusal report, it became evident that the application has been considered as a 3-bed submission, however not the updated and more in-depth version. The vast majority of the report is identical to that of my former application, evidencing that my current submission has failed to be adequately considered on its own merits. Furthermore, no site visit has been conducted. There has been no request for any further information regarding any of the original features which are to be retained, despite their importance. In fact, the report makes no mention of these original features whatsoever, which we've specified are to be retained. There's also no mention of the significance of retaining the original wall at both levels, despite it being a key factor in my previous submission. There's been no request for an updated heritage statement, despite its importance, considering the fact that the barn is a non-designated heritage asset. This application has been assessed using a heritage report which is not up to date and does not reflect the changes within the scheme. Some of these changes are the changes to the boundary, the removal of the stable block, the removal of the opening at the back, the retention of a number of the original fixtures and fittings, the retention of the internal wall at both levels, the recording and documenting of key features, to name but a few. Therefore, I'd like to request that if planning is to be refused today, it instead be deferred for further discussion with planning to allow for the submission of further key information highlighting the significance of all of these factors which have been unaddressed. This will be conveyed through an up-to-date heritage report and updated plans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. I think you have some views on that, I'm guessing. Do you want to explain further where you're coming from?
I'll come back very briefly. The request to submit additional and amended information came 7 days ago. So the application it was only at the point that it was referred to the committee that requests were made to postpone the item coming to committee till next month and to make amendments to it. I would suggest that in terms of the areas that the applicant wishes to make changes, they had the previous application reports to refer to. They had the minutes and the recordings of members' conversations, and indeed the agent was present at the meeting last time. So they had that information. We have a pre-application advice service as well. The applicant hasn't taken advantage of before making this application. It's come in just off the back of the previous one, without any contact with us in between time. So we're satisfied in that regard. In terms of the suggestion that the heritage assessment is out of date, it is the heritage assessment that the applicant has submitted in support of their application. We've had no reason to go back and further query that. The plans as submitted suggest that heritage features internally would be retained. They haven't specified which ones. If members were minded to approve the application, we would of course seek to secure that. But given the overall recommendation and the fact that the application, and as a result the report, much unchanged from last time, we had no reason to go back and request that information and put the applicant to the cost of preparing that. There's nothing really more for me to say on that point, I don't think, Chair. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Members, Ken?
Just for clarification, Chair, the title of this application is to create a 5-bedroom property. The first floor plan showed 5 bedrooms. Paragraph 10 says convert the barn to a single 3-bedroom open market.
Well, Mark introduced that, didn't he?
I do beg your pardon if I missed that.
Yeah, when I introduced the item, I corrected that. That should read 5-bedroom.
Right. Any members got any thoughts on this? Yes.
If I may, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate the efforts that the applicant is making to secure the future of this property, and I recognise that the principle of conversion is in there, but I just don't see enough change to what is being proposed to the previous refused application, and I don't feel at this stage that I can support the proposals.
Thank you. Ken Richardson.
I've just been reading the report again. I can't see where the services are going to get to this property and the services away from the property as well. I just wondered about wastewater, sewage, electric.
It's a point that the parish council make, I see, about things like bin collection and things like that. How do those fit in?
Bin storage within the site is shown. We don't have details of where bins would be placed for bin collection day, for instance. In terms of services more widely, the site obviously is isolated. I'd expect it wouldn't be connected to main sewage, for example, and we'd be looking at packaged treatment plants. Those are details that we'd commonly require by condition if we were approving a new dwelling.
It is isolated in one sense, but actually there's a house further along the road, further up the hill to the north. I don't feel as though we're any further forward than we were on the previous occasion, actually. I'm going to move it for refusal on the ground set out in the report. Is that seconded? That's seconded. Has anybody got any further comments to add? All those... Matt?
Yeah, I think it's definitely sort of worth reiterating that there are good policy reasons for not developing this. It makes really good sense to have lots of detailed conversations with the planning team if you're putting in an application like this, because it's you know, you need to have their support. You need to be, you know, making sure that you're doing what you can to keep the planning officers happy, which is because I think it's very easy to refuse an application like this.
Okay. Well, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour of refusing for the ground set out in the report? That's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. The next one is agenda item 10. Can I just check that all the speakers are here for agenda item 10? I've got Miss Garlick, Miss Dearman, Miss Collins. Are you all here? So she's going to be late anyway, is she?
She's going to try her best to get here. She's just trying to get recovery to get here.
Is she likely to be here in the next 5 minutes? No, okay. We may then have to do without her. So I'm on that basis. Hopefully not. I think let's see how it goes. Are you all happy for us to move straight on to this now? And Jim? Yeah, okay. Who's taking this? Adam? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just move us on to where we are, the right place. This is a householder application. Jollyfield Farm, Chelmorton visited this site yesterday. I'm sure members will be familiar with Chelmorton. This is the centre of the village along the main road, and you can see the sort of the starts of the strip field systems coming off. Joyfield Farm is on Common Lane, which is here, which we came down in the minibus, and the site is here, which is the site of what was a traditional barn, which was converted about 25 years ago to a dwelling house with planning permission. And the applicants own this site and obviously own this, which is a field adjacent. So the application proposes 3 elements comprising alterations and extensions to the barn itself and a detached triple garage, which we'll look at. So this is the property here in the distance. You can see members are on the site. This is the access we went through in the bus with the barn in the background. So we're stood here with Chelmorton behind us. And then this is looking the other way towards the garden of the property. Members, we all noticed on site this fence, which is, just to point out, doesn't have planning permission. And we're aware of that. And this is the barn to our right here. And again, this is looking at the barn itself. And then in the site, this is the barn sort of looking from the garden, where the garage would be behind us, which we'll see on the plans in a minute, and the applicant's vehicles. And then looking towards where the garage is proposed here. This is the access we saw a minute ago. And this is a lime tree, which is mentioned in the report. And again, looking back at where the proposed garage would be here. And this is the other side of the barn, complete other side where we've been looking at, where there is a link proposed here. And again, looking into where that is there. And that's, you know, as I mentioned, that fence does not have planning permission at the moment. So to go through the plans, this is the existing plan, as we've seen. This is the proposed plan. So the main difference on this plan is you can see the proposed garage, which we'll look at in a minute, which would sort of face forward with its garage doors. And then here is also a lean-to porch proposed here, and this lean-to link. So that's the existing floor plan, and this is the proposed, so this is the porch, and this is the glazed link, which would link between the existing living space and what's currently an outbuilding, which can only be accessed from the outside, which the applicant intends to put to use as a living accommodation. Front elevation is unchanged, other than you can just see the lean-to porch there. Side elevation again, you can see the main changes are here. This door will be changed to a glazed door, and this is the lean-to porch. And then from the rear of the property, the existing situation, and then you can see the porch there on the side. And then from the elevation, where the link is proposed, that's existing. So this is the outbuilding I mentioned, which the applicant wishes to turn into a snug. And to do that, they're proposing this glazed link here. And that just shows you the section of that link. So this is the proposed garage. You can see a triple detached garage with stairs up to the side, which lead to accommodation above. The side, you can see stairs up to a doorway into the roof space. Blank gable facing the road. And then the rear elevation, blank other than 3 roof lights. See, this is the floor plan of the garage, space for 3 vehicles. And upstairs, the applicant proposes to use the space upstairs at the home office and domestic storage. So the main issues here are design, impact upon the barn as a heritage asset in its own right, and impact upon the conservation area where this is located. The property itself is a barn, that's its character. Although it's been converted, it has retained its character generally, with some alterations. So officers have got concerns about this proposed link and its design. Officers are concerned that this has the appearance essentially of a domestic conservatory, and in the context of a barn, that character isn't appropriate in officers' view. There could be scope in principle for a link here, but this isn't the design approach that our design guide would advocate. There's no objection from officers to the proposed lean-to or to that alteration to that door. That is quite a simple appearance and is more reflective of the barn, so that is in accordance with our design guide. The garage, we are concerned about its scale and its location. It'll have quite a significant impact on the street scene and the conservation area, adding quite a significant building in an area of the strip field between what was historically the barn and the settlement. And there are also concerns about the impact of the garage upon this lime tree here, which has had concerns raised by our tree officer. Because this lime tree is next to the road, most of its root system will be in this direction, and the proposed garage would be constructed partly in its root protection area. And our tree officer's got significant concerns that if that were to happen, then it's very likely over the next however many years that tree would decline and potentially die. And there is scope to have a garage in the site without having that impact. So the application is recommended for refusal for the reasons set out in the report.
Thank you,
Chair.
Right, I've got three objectors to speak. Is there a particular order you want to go in? No, so if I call Sarah Garlick's not here, so if I now call Mr. Dearman. Yes, please. Now there's a button in front of you. There should be a little light on behind your microphone when you press the button. So if you press yes, press that. That's okay.
So we're on, are we?
And you have 3 minutes in which to address us.
I'll make it as succinct as I can. Good afternoon. My name is Bob Dearman, and I've been a resident of Chelmorton for over 25 years. My property, the Green Cottage, lies adjacent to the curtilage of Jollyfields Farm on two boundaries. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My primary concern is that the proposed development will be detrimental to the valued characteristics of the village conservation area and the nationally important medieval strip field system. Also that the Triple Bay garage would further encroach on what is now an open area of the original strip field. My second concern is that after perusing ancient maps, the property was originally a barn, and under previous planning agreements, any proposed developments should maintain much of its original character. However, a considerable amount of this intention has been negated by unauthorised additions and renovations by several owners. All these renovations have made serious inroads on the quality and conservation of this particular strip. My third concern is the potential damage during construction work to the tree root systems of a protected lime and several large mature sycamore trees which back onto my property. Over a period of time, imminent damage may result in the deteriorating condition of the trees in question, possibly fatal, and safety to life issues. In recent storms, two large sycamores have already fallen, fortunately away from my property. From observations over the last 2 years, it has been noted that there has been a steady increase in large construction vehicles and the industrial plant. Common Lane is single track and the only access to Jollyfields Farm. It is narrow, in a very bad state of repair, and inadequately built to withstand these types of vehicles. Already this is creating difficulties and safety issues for walkers, cyclists, horse riders, as well as the use by the local farming community and villagers attempting to use the Transpeak bus service at Old Coalpit Lane. In certain places, because of the proximity of the dry stone walls, it is dangerous and difficult to avoid oncoming traffic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So the next speaker I've got is Mrs. Collins.
Do I need to press anything, or is it okay now?
You're fine, that's right.
Oh, class. Sorry. Yes, I'm Mrs. Collins. I'd like to thank the board for granting me permission to speak at this meeting. As an ex-vice chair of Chelmorton Parish Council for many years and a resident who for 37 years lived opposite to what is now known as Jollyfield Farm, I would like to object to this application for the following reasons. Chelmorton Village is in a conservation area, and as such, the historic field systems are of the utmost importance and need to be protected under Peak Park policy. The development would be directly within the field strip system and would therefore fail to enhance the conservation area as per the board's recommendations. The development would almost certainly affect the lime tree which is near the entrance to the development. It would also affect the wood at the far side of the property which has large, mature, protected historic trees which would inevitably have their roots disrupted by digging down for the footings of this building. These trees were planted many years ago to offer protection for all the surrounding properties from the prevailing winds. The applicant already has a large garage with room above, which was granted by Peak Park several years ago. I was on the parish council at the time, and with many strict clauses attached. It would appear that this has been bricked up inside and used as an unauthorised holiday cottage by the present owners. It is therefore dubious as to the validity of this application. The application clearly states that the proposed development will not be visible from the road, which is why I am guessing that the applicants have erected a huge fence, well over 6 feet in places, next to the roadside of the property, which I believe they have been asked to remove by Peak Park. It remains in situ. The current owners have also erected a large wooden summer house behind the property for which we have seen no permission granted. They have registered Jollyfield Farm as their business address with Company's House and are using the field behind as parking for their trucks and for large vehicles. As far as I'm aware, there has been no application for change of use of this property. The proposed development would be highly visible. The access from the field is very difficult with poor visibility and would not lend itself to multiple large vehicles being parked within. Common Lane, as lots of people have said, is used by dog walkers, hikers and people wishing to use the bus service route. It is not suitable for heavy traffic other than for necessary farm vehicles. The previous owners put a second access from the back of the property in, which has never been used but again has no permission. The new owners have now placed 2 large barrels and 2 large troughs by the side of the house directly on the highway. Various locals have complained about these to highways and to parish council, as it is one of only 2 passing places along the lane, which now makes it difficult and dangerous for cars, vans and for large agricultural vehicles to pass by.
Mr. Collins, I'm going to have to ask you to wind up, if you would,
Yes.
please, because you are allowed 3 minutes.
Sorry.
You're going over the time.
Yes, they all also remain in situ. Finally, it's unclear how the applicants would get a large caravan around the back of the proposed building, as according to the scale it would seem physically impossible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Sorry about going over.
So I've heard from Mr. Dearman and Mrs. Collins, and I've now got Richard Mundy. Yes, it's not Richard, it's James, isn't it?
We're on. Good afternoon, committee. The applicants can't attend today, so they've asked me to make some representations on their behalf. The application, as you've seen, as the planning officer has shown, it's in 3 parts, and they'd like to make it clear that the parish council were in support of the application as submitted. There were 3 elements to the application: the lean-to porch, which Adam's already said there were no objections to that. There's the glazed link, which is round the back, which can't be seen by anybody, which, having had discussions with the planning officers, in principle it can be acceptable. The design needed tweaking. And then the 3rd element is the triple garage with the office and domestic storage above. This is the main area of objections. To make it clear, there have been further discussions with the applicant and the planning officers regarding this scheme, and we've discussed alternative designs, but the applicants have made the decision to submit or keep the submitted scheme to the one to bring forward to committee. There have been a few issues regarding how long it's taken to get it through, so they wanted a decision made, so that's why they've brought this to committee. Regarding the objections to the garage, the applicants will use it for their own personal vehicles, domestic vehicles, and it's in a domestic curtilage. The trough at the front, there's been some comments about newts and frogs. As far as the applicants are aware, they've only owned the house for a few years. It's always been empty and it's a concrete trough. there's no evidence of newts or frogs in it. There's another objection about construction noise, which is a normal objection, which we've seen numerous times, but obviously construction noise is only acceptable or only happens during the construction phase and only temporary. The proposed garage is no higher than any of the surrounding buildings to the rear of where it is proposed. There's an existing hedge and fence which has been shown, but the fence is proposed to come down once the hedge has been established. That will provide some screening. We're aware of the tree situation. There's been a tree report done and submitted. The tree officer's commented on it, and we're aware that T1, which is I can't remember, is it a lime tree at the top? We're aware that that is the most significant tree, and it does need protecting. There were discussions to pull the garage further down, away from that tree, but that would have resulted in another consultation period of minimum for 4 weeks, and the applicants were keen to get the application decided. So as I said, there's been discussions about revised designs, but we've decided to keep the application as submitted. We hope you can support the application as submitted. However, if you feel that a deferral will be more appropriate to be able to agree a suitable scheme with the planning officers, then we'd be happy to work with that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Right, members, what I do urge you to do is to concentrate on the development as now proposed. There is a history to this site. There are other problems which the officers will have to deal with, but we need to look at the particular proposals that are in front of us today. Sorry.
I'm also Mrs. Collins, but I'd also registered myself to speak. There should be two.
I've got one Mrs. Collins, which is a Jade Collins.
Ah, that was me. That was you.
Oh.
There was two. There should have been two Mrs. Collinses down.
Yeah. Perhaps they thought
Perhaps
we were all
the
the
same
same.
one.
We're both Jade Collins.
No.
You've got Jade Collins.
What?
We've got Jade Collins.
Well, we've had a non-Jade Collins speak. Well, I must allow you to come forward, but please don't repeat. We've had very similar presentations so far.
Yeah.
Please let us have something new, if you would be kind enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I may well have to offer Mr. Mundy the right to come back. Yes, you're quite right.
So, I'd just like to firstly thank the committee for allowing me to speak today. My family have been residents at Rockfield, opposite Jollyfield Farm, since 1963. As previously mentioned, my first point was regarding the lime trees and the sycamore trees, which are in the conservation area. And again, the second point was regarding the building being clearly visible, both as a driver, dog walker, and a horse rider from any bridleway, footpath or road. The building will be clearly visible. Another point is that the applicants appear to have a disregard for the Peak Park planning rules and regulations, as there are already a number of contraventions within the site of Jollyfield Farm, which includes a lack of a heritage assessment on the site and a high fence which has already had a request for removal, which also led me to bring to your attention about the Registry of High Peak Access Limited, and there would be no change of use for the application. The single track road upon which the property is sited is just not suitable for the volume of traffic that the development would create. The road's already in a poor state of repair due to the heavy construction vehicles arriving at the property on a daily basis, and this is making the road unsafe for the dog walkers and people to try and use the only bus stop in Chalmorton. The property already has a large double garage, which if it was returned to its original state as per the original planning agreement, we don't see a further need for a garage, as this would easily accommodate the applicant's domestic vehicles. And the proposed building does not in any way enhance a non-designated heritage asset in the conservation area, which we, the residents of Chalmorton, are trying to preserve. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And now I must allow Jim. Do you want to respond in any way to that? Okay, thank you. Right, members, as I say, concentrate on the actual proposals rather than some of the side issues. We did a site visit yesterday. Has any member got any comments they wish to make? Ken?
Thank you, Chair. Do we do any kind of needs assessment for garages of this scale, given that there appears to be a pre-existing facility in the barn and its environs. A triple garage for a dwelling of this size just seems over the top. That's just an aside. I think more appropriate, or most appropriate, is there in the conclusion section, paragraph 57, insufficient heritage assessment. That of itself, by my lights, should be sufficient to reject the application, because it's not providing the information that is required in order for us to make an informed decision. I think the other elements in the conclusion, things like the siting and the scale of the proposed development, are equally pertinent. And it did seem from the site visit yesterday that this is a business plot as much as it is a dwelling plot, and there has been, as has been instanced by some of the objectors, a change of use of the area, which is not to its benefit. So, I mean, along with other things like the impact on the tree, I think the garage of itself, it's quite appropriate for this application to be refused. Whether things like the porch, which appears to be acceptable to most folk, or changes to the proposed link can be approved, and elements of this application not approved, I don't know, I'd be advised. But on the basis that the principal element is the garage, I would go along with the officer recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other members? Is that a proposal?
Chair.
Yeah, okay.
In regard to, do we have a limit or a requirement for information to justify garaging? No. Different occupants of dwellings will have different desires for garaging. Some people won't have any cars. I'm sure members here will have multiple vehicles, potentially, or none, or perhaps will like motorcycles. People have different hobbies or wants, and there's nothing wrong in principle with a domestic property wanting a garage or several garages. Our focus as planners is to look at scale, character and appearance. And if someone wants 5 garages and that can be accommodated, perhaps in the context of a large house on a big site, then might be absolutely fine. But even 1 garage for a particular dwelling might be completely unacceptable in terms of its impact. So it all depends on impacts rather than the principle. This application is a householder application, and the application is proposing a domestic garage. So we have to consider it on that basis. That is what the application is proposing. Any concerns about potential changes of uses or future changes of uses is a separate matter that we have to assess. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. If I may could just come back on one element. Thank you, Adam, for that clarification. It's just to underline, I suppose, that the purpose of our accepting conversion of traditional farm buildings into dwellings is to conserve them as traditional farm buildings so that their character can be read. I think the character of the barn, the original barn, is being eroded significantly, and it does raise the point, I would suggest, Chair, that the construction of a garage of this magnitude in a space that underlined the divorce of the original traditional farm building from the settlement of Chelmorton is further eroding the historic character of that building. And it's, whilst there may be ways of accommodating it into that space where it is less intrusive, it is a further erosion, which I think warrants consideration and perhaps even further support for refusal of this application.
Which I think is the first reason for refusal, really, in effect. Mike?
Yes, I think I don't disagree at all with what Ken said, and I think it's unfortunate that we've got 3 elements all bundled together. And I think in the circumstances, rather than try and unpick those 3, the best option at this stage would be to refuse, and I would propose that.
Thank you very much.
Time.
Any other member wish to speak? I've got Matt next. Seconded, thank you. Matt?
Yeah, it's a question about biodiversity and biodiversity net gain. Is that not applicable in this case? because it's a householder application. Is that right?
Correct.
Thank you very much. Right. It's already been seconded, actually. Thank you very much. Any other member wish to contribute? In which case, the motion is that this be refused for the grounds set out in the report. All those in favour? Anyone against? Nope. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That is refused for all the reasons set out in the report. Thank you very much. We have dealt with the last item on the agenda, so that concludes the meeting at 20 to 1. Thank you for your